26, 2024 meeting of the Transportation Commission to order. Ariana, if you'd please read the instructions.
Welcome to our virtual meeting. Sorry. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff, members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak or ask questions. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak. The name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Ariana. Aiden, if you could call the roll, please.
Sure. Juliana Bennett, who is excused. MGR Govindarajan. Here. Dina Anita Martinez Rutherford is also excused. Barbara Harrington McKinney, who I don't see. Ann Kovich.
Here.
Robbie Weber.
Here.
Denise Jess is excused. Pepe Barros.
Here.
Darren Wozniewski is excused. Chris McCahill.
Here.
Nikki Vandermeulen, who I don't see. Bill Bremer.
Here.
And Harold Kleens.
Here.
Okay, thanks so much for coming, everybody. And Bill, with a number of absences, you are definitely up for motions and voting tonight. Did everybody have an opportunity to, and we have, well, I just double checking, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, we have 7. So if we lose anybody, we would be just at quorum. And if we lose 2 people, we lose quorum. So we'll just have to watch that very carefully. Aiden sent out some revised minutes earlier with the motion on the crossing guards. Did everybody have a chance to take a look at them?
And I'm going to recuse myself. I was not at the meeting.
Okay. So you're going to abstain?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm going to abstain too. I couldn't make it to the meeting before, and I didn't have the time to read through that there.
Okay. So that's 2 folks who are abstaining.
Can we make, I think we still need a motion to adopt.
We do. Yeah,
move.
Eric has his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, obviously folks are welcome to abstain, just given our low numbers. I do want to let folks know that you are able to vote and contribute on discussion on the minutes, even if you weren't at a previous meeting.
Even if they choose to abstain, though, I guess I would have to vote to pass then, right?
Yeah, just in case of low numbers in terms of approving the minutes, I just wanted to let folks know they are welcome to vote. There's no rule that you can't vote on the minutes just because you weren't in attendance at the previous meeting.
Okay, thanks. Robbie?
Second.
Says motion from Robbie?
I seconded.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who made the motion?
The motion and I seconded.
Okay, so Harold made the motion and Robbie seconded. Alder Govindarajan?
Quick question, if that's in order. I do have to leave for 5 to 10 minutes. Are we at quorum? I will be able to join back pretty soon after.
Harold, are you able to stay?
Yeah, I think we should be good at BPW, so I could probably stay.
Okay, if he can stay, okay. As long as you're the only one.
By 5:30.
As you're the only one who leaves, we should be okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and Bill and Pepe wish to abstain.
Based on what Eric has said, I will vote.
Okay. Is everybody okay saying there's a unanimous consent vote to approve the minutes? Okay, all right. Great. Sorry, dropped my papers there. Okay, do we have any public comment for items not on the agenda?
No, we do not.
Okay. Okay. How about recusals, disclosures and recusals? Anybody have any disclosures or recusals this evening? Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda, I noticed that we had an email commenting on items 2 through 5. But is anybody registered to speak on those items?
They registered for each item, but not wishing to speak.
Okay, okay. Did you wish to, I suppose it'd be interesting to hear, Robbie, go ahead.
Actually, since I think the person just sent written comments, I don't believe she wanted to speak, but I was just going to move approval of 2 through 5.
Okay, so we have items 2 through 5 on the consent agenda, and Robbie's moved approval. Is there a second? Carl, that's a second?
So second.
Okay, just to be fair, do you want to just read what the position was on the person who registered to speak? Or didn't register to speak, but did register?
Sure, they registered opposing each item.
Okay, all right, so we have somebody who registered in opposition to all. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the consent agenda. I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain or wishes a roll call vote.
And
Yes,
I even before that email came, I tried to look up on each of those, and I really couldn't get enough information as to what those grants were for. So I did not want to have a consent agenda on those items. That's my
so you wish that they all, I'm sorry, Bill, you wish that they are all separated out from the consent agenda?
yes.
Okay, so
With
scratch
just a
that.
brief explanation of what each grant was for.
Okay, all right. We'll go back and then scratch those from the consent agenda. Sorry, I should have asked that first. Robbie, did you have a comment?
Yeah, in just sort of a point of information, in case people don't realize, if you go from the history tab to the text tab in Legistar, it will generally tell you a little bit more about what it is. Some people don't even know that you can do that, but you can click on that tab and it'll give you a little more information, especially on these grants, which I looked at because I was curious exactly what they were about. But, you know, if people want to look at that, it might give more information.
Yeah, you can also print out a report too. Yeah.
I tried, but I didn't get very much information. So I'm
Okay.
sorry if I'm not trying to read into it, but you know, I tried to go into the council and everything else, and I really couldn't get a good idea.
I mean, it's Bill, it's fine. Any member has has the right to ask that items be separated from the consent agenda. So, Renee, are you able to give us a brief? Well, we'll go one by one then, and if you could just give us a brief rundown on each of them, one by one, and we'll vote on them one by one.
Sure. Yeah, that's totally fine. And Dave Hansen is here and he's a little bit more familiar with the first one. So I don't know if he's able to jump in. Looks like he can jump in to talk about the first item.
Okay.
Sure. Thanks, Renee. So there's 2 under the carbon reduction program grants that we're seeking approval for. One is for replacing traffic signal controllers and cabinets.
Which one? We're on item 2, which is Legistar 83918.
Right, and I believe there's 2 of them on there. Is that correct? For One is for traffic signal controllers, and the other one is for LED traffic signals.
Yes, they're both on that, listed on that, yes.
Yes, I'm going to take each of those and describe them briefly.
I think they're on item 2. So if you could do the LED signals first, because that's agenda item 2, they'll vote on that. And
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Obviously, I thought they were lumped together.
Yeah.
I'll take LED.
It says grant funds through the carbon reduction program for project this traffic signal controller and project that LED traffic signal. So it sounds like they're both on the same one.
okay.
Yep, and that's what I was just about to start on.
Yeah,
Um,
it is confusing. So I can see where it would be confusing, Bill.
Okay, so for the traffic signal controllers, this would be the replacement of the controller cabinets, everything that's inside of the cabinets, and the actual controller box, which is really the brain or the unit that controls the signalized intersection. So we have a number of them on non-connecting highways, which is the locations are restricted to non-connecting highways. So basically anything that doesn't have a number on it, like, East Wash should be 151, 113, like that. Those are not included in this, but basically everything else. So it's these local traffic signals. Anything that has the older architecture, we call it NEMA TS1. It's very hard to maintain those type of controllers. So this would be an upgrade to a NEMA TS2 style controller cabinet. And all the, basically, like I was saying, all the inner workings of those cabinets. That would, and it's procurement only. So this is not, getting a contractor on board or anything. This is simply just to purchase them. And we would find other means and methods for installing them. A lot of them we can just do, with our own shop staff to accomplish that work. So in summary, that is really what that one is. And I believe should be in the attachments. I believe it was 151 signalized intersections. But do you want me to continue on with the second one, or maybe take questions on this one if there are any? Because they're two separate.
You can ask questions. Bill, go ahead.
Thanks. So it's 151 of our non-connecting controllers that are TS1s. And so is there any time restrictions on how we can, how long we have to replace those?
Yeah, there's a sunset date on the agreement, and I believe it's the end of June of 2030. Now, the sunset date really means that's when all the reimbursement checks and all the basically all the paperwork on DOT's end has to be complete. So we're actually looking at doing this over a 5-year span. So, we look at the entire project and basically kind of chew it up or break it down into equal portions. And quite honestly, it's more manageable, from a staff perspective to do it that way, and, on how to basically store these units because they're not exactly small. So that, and that's really the primary reason of doing it. And plus too, it's all, I don't think that the companies, that we buy from, like Econolite and these other ones, that there's no way that they could even provide it all in a quick turnaround anyway. So, we feel that this is kind of the easiest way to go fiscally and from, stock management and deployment. So yeah, 5 years.
What is the city match?
City match is 20% on this. So with this agreement, we are looking at 1.0488 million. Federal would be 4.1952 million. Total estimated cost is 5.244 million.
Okay, thank you. Can I make a motion now?
Sure.
Yeah, I'd like to move approval of this grant application.
Okay, Bill made a motion. Harold, is that a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion, or Bill, did you wish to speak to your motion?
No, I think this is a good application because it's something we were going to have to do, and it's to move to the TS2s is a good a good maintenance, for the city.
Okay. All right, I'll assume a unanimous consent vote on item number 2 unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. Phil, your hand is up. I'm assuming you don't.
Thank you.
Okay. Ariana, if you could make me a co-host so I can put hands down, that would be very helpful. Thanks. Okay, so that motion is carried. All right, item number 3.
All right, I can talk a little bit about number 3. This is also Wisconsin DOT through their new redistribution program. They anticipate having additional funds within the Transportation Alternatives Program, and they were soliciting for projects that were primarily similar procurement projects that could meet the very fast deadlines they have. So the first part of that is related to bicycle counters. Our 2 current visual bicycle counters, the one along Lake Monona and the one on the Southwest Path, have reached the end of life. They have had some problems, and they also use the 2G or 3G network, which they are not always able to reach because that is kind of an obsolete technology. We had already begun to look at funding to replace those. So this would allow us to get 80% of the funding through this grant and only have to pay 20% ourselves, as well as some funds to add maybe some smaller visual displays on a couple, depending on how the final prices come out for this project. That is the first part. The second part is very small. It is to buy LED stop paddles that meet MUTCD requirements. Currently, our stop paddles came over from the police department, and they kind of have an LED. They have a light, but it's kind of just attached by hand. It isn't built into it. So these will be much brighter, provide better visibility. We, as you all know, we now have elementary starting very early in the morning where it can be dark, even if the weather, fairly dark, even if the weather is good. So this will also be helpful just in bad weather days to increase the visibility of our crossing guards. So we already would be hopefully doing this kind of in little doses, like maybe 10 in a year and 10 the next year. And this allows us to get 80% of the funding to do all of them in 1 year. So that is they're much smaller projects.
Okay, great. Thanks, Renee. Are there questions for Renee? Carl?
Renee, quick question about the counters. So is that basically going to replace the ones with like whatever latest model it is, or is that going to go out like request for proposals, and we don't know what there might be different companies offering these?
Yeah, we will be working with Wistat on that because doing a sole source to purchase the other one is not an impossibility, but it may be worth our while to look at the other options that have come to the market as well to see if there's anything comparable before we would make a decision. So we will look at if new companies are available that weren't in the past before trying to make the case for a sole source.
Okay, thank you.
Pepe, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Renee. Quick question. I don't know if maybe you mentioned this, but is this only for replacing the current 2 locations, or are you is everybody thinking on expanding this network of?
Yeah, I think ideally we're going to have enough money to add at least a couple more, but that will depend on the final costs. Our, the proposal is to definitely upgrade the first 2, which are in pretty key destinations, and then use the remaining funds to expand. There are some new visual displays that are less expensive on the market and smaller that I think we would be able to expand a little bit our reach of having a more visual counter and online count data, but it will depend on final pricing.
Thank you.
Bill, go ahead.
Renee, these are all for the school crossing guards and not for city staff on the streets?
Correct. The stop paddles are enough to cover all of our crossing guards that we have employed. Yeah.
So the paddles that we will have after this, would they still be useful for some of our city crews that work during daylight, right?
Yeah, we would be able to make those available or also, allow someone to have a backup as well. Depending. So we wouldn't be throwing the old ones away at all. We would be figuring out what's the best use of those.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Anybody have any other comments or questions for Renee? Do we have a motion on item 3? Bill?
I'll make a motion of approval of this agenda item for the bicycle counters and the stop slow pedals.
Okay, there's a motion by Bill. Robbie, is that a second?
That is a second.
Okay, Bill, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Again, this I think is a wise use of our funds because we're going to using the better lights on the stop slow paddles. And if we've got equipment that is hard to maintain, I think it's with the counters. I think it's time to invest and take advantage of the grant opportunity.
Okay, thanks. Is there any further discussion? Okay, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Alder Govindarajan?
I'm going to abstain. I wasn't here for the discussion or presentation.
Okay, Alder Govindarajan is going to abstain.
This is Alder Harrington McKinney. I'm just logging in. I was not here for the discussion. I'm abstaining as well.
Okay, so let me just double check how many people are coming and going. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8. So we would need 5 votes. So without Alder Harrington McKinney and Alder Govindarajan, we would have enough to pass. So I wouldn't need to vote, but I would certainly support it if I needed to. So the motion is carried. Thanks. So we move on to item 4. Is that you also, Renee?
Yep, I can also talk about this one. This is a resolution related to a grant to the US DOT for a program called Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation, otherwise known as the SMART grant. You will have seen this in previous iterations. This is our 3rd attempt. It is kind of a technology focused grant, I guess. I would describe it in a kind of simple language. We are working closely with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Traffic Operations and Safety Lab on this one. It is focused on kind of vulnerable road users and having sort of a technology detection system using LiDAR and cameras to kind of predict kind of conflicts with motor vehicle drivers and to test an idea around sort of different ways that you can help people be alerted to upcoming conflict. And this is really just for kind of the testing, determining scalability, and then ideally if this sort of idea would seem workable after that, you could apply for an implementation grant. It is for up to $2 million. There's no local match required for this one. And we do have a really good partnership. We also brought in Madison College to kind of help get students get real world sort of learning on technology and to kind of help with testing this in the Park Street corridor to see how scalable this is. So I can answer more questions about this one, but as I said, it's kind of the same thing that we've applied for 3 other times. We're just trying to strengthen the application based on the feedback that we received from the US DOT.
Okay, comments or questions for Renee? Harold?
Thanks, Renee. So I think what I hear you saying is that we never got any of the funding that we applied for this whole Park Street Smart Corridor thing, because I remember this from like a long time ago.
Correct. This is a pretty competitive grant and we have not been selected yet. So we continue to, after each one, take in the feedback that the USDOT is willing to give to try to strengthen it and work together with our partners to kind of like coalesce it into the right fit and make sure that they understand kind of what we're proposing, because it is something new that we're proposing to trial.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing no hands, we need a motion. Harold?
Moving approval.
Robbie?
Second,
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there further discussion, Bill?
I better recuse myself. I didn't realize this was a TOPS partner, and since I work at TOPS, I better recuse myself.
Okay, so
Even
Bill's
though I'm
gonna,
not directly involved with the project.
okay. Eric, would he just need to disclose the relationship rather than recusing himself?
Yeah, I mean, you can disclose the relationship and abstain. Generally, if something rises to the level of recusal, you don't want to not be involved in participation either. But in this case,
I will abstain.
Say again, Bill?
I will abstain.
Okay. So Bill's going to abstain. Pepe?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask a question to Renee, but I just wasn't quick enough with my hand before we
sure.
moved to
Go ahead.
discussion. Renee, when you mentioned that this new technologies and systems would help alert for a potential conflict, do we have any further knowledge about how these alerts work, and will they alert all parties, or which parties will be alerted?
Yeah, that is a really good question, which I think, obviously, I think the idea is to test the idea that you could alert someone walking as well as a driver of a motor vehicle through this, but obviously it's a little bit more challenging with a pedestrian. But I think that's the idea, is to look at sort of ways that you can do that using different sensors and technologies that would be available, like light up boards that might alert a pedestrian at that moment. Obviously, that's not a perfect thing because they might not be looking right at that. So I think it is kind of testing some different ways to make that work. So that's not a huge answer, but I think that's partially because we're kind of trying to test different ways of doing this to see what would work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And if I understand well, then what we know is that the systems would potentially alert the people in the motor vehicle?
Yes, absolutely. That's a big part of it, is alerting the person in the motor vehicle. And so part of this is kind of bringing together some products to test and kind of developing them for field testing and then evaluating which of those things actually work to improve crash reduction for people walking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I personally like the idea that it doesn't need a match. So it's a good opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for sharing.
Okay, any other comments or questions or discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote, recognizing that Bill is going to abstain. Anybody else wish to abstain or vote no? Okay, the motion is carried. Next, we have item 5. Is that you again, Renee?
Yep, this is me. This is related to a transportation alternatives program grant that we got in the past. This is actually just a resolution to sign the contract. We went through a request for proposals to hire a contractor to help with the Safe Routes to School plan development and the school planning work that is funded through this WSDOT TAP grant. And through that competitive process, we have selected Tool Design with Equity by Design as a subcontractor. And this is just the 3-party contract between the city, Tool Design, and the Wisconsin DOT to start that project. So I can answer more detailed questions about it, but this is kind of a grant that we received in the past and now are getting ready to move forward with the work.
Okay. Comments or questions? Okay, seeing no hands, we need a motion. Robbie?
Move approval?
Bill?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Okay, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. Okay, thanks. Next we have review and approval of the TC handbook and special rules. There's only one change recommended and it's in the special rules. As I was reviewing section 3301 of the Madison ordinances, I noticed that it requires that we review our special rules every 2 years. And I thought, well, you know, we really didn't have any other changes. So the only reason we had to bring it back was our special rule says we have to review them every year. So my recommendation, and I talked with Eric about this, is that we change our special rules to align with the guidelines in 3301 and say that the requirement is for us to review the special rules every 2 years. That doesn't mean that we can't bring the handbook and the special rules back in between if we find something that we want to review or potentially change. But if we have nothing, then, you know, it seems kind of silly to bring it in just to review it and say, yeah, everything's good. We don't need to make any changes. So that's really all we have on this. Comments, questions? And I did have Eric review it as well, because this is something that we've had the chair, staff, and the city attorney's office work on together in the past. Okay, I'm seeing no questions. Harold?
Yeah, I would move approval with the proposed changes.
Okay, so there's a motion to approve with the proposed changes. And Robbie?
Second?
Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve with the proposed changes. Is there further discussion? Okay, seeing no hands, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain or wishes a roll call vote. Okay, seeing no hands, we will move on. Okay, next we have the annual work plan. The handbook requires that we have an annual work plan. When the Transportation Commission began meeting back in July of 2018, we all thought that a work plan would be a good idea. And Yang took point on that. And over the course of many months after that, put together a great first work plan, which was approved in June of 2019. And we found this to be a very useful tool for us to use. Since TC was merged with the Transportation Policy and Planning Board back in 2023, and we began meeting in June of 2023, we looked at the work plan and there was a lot that needed to be reviewed and considered when trying to merge both of these bodies together and rethinking the work plan. So we used the original TC's work plan as a foundation. And we took out those things that were no longer necessary due to the merger and added in the additional duties that came from the Transportation Policy and Planning Board and in the recreated 3356 due to the merger. Since there are 8 members of the Transportation Commission who used to be on the old Transportation Commission, even though it's busy, I put together a redlined version so you could see this is what we used to have, this is what we have now. So like I said, it's really busy, but it does show you the old and the proposed new for the recreated TC. And and the goal is to be efficient and effective, which is even more important because we have these greatly expanded responsibilities, including those of the policy and planning board, and trying to find other ways to get us information via email or other ways if it doesn't have to actually come to TC and be discussed here. And that gives us more time at TC to talk about those things that we do have on our agenda. And this is our first annual work plan for the recreated TC, and there will be opportunities to amend it and enhance it. And that happened quite often over the years with the original Transportation Commission. I worked on making some changes yesterday to the section on racial equity and social justice. There were some questions raised to staff with regard to how it was showing with a semi-annual check-in. And even though it was an ongoing commitment, we went that extra step and said that we want to actually have it be an agenda item twice a year so we can check in on how we're doing, check in on our progress. But just to make sure it's completely clear to everybody that this is an ongoing commitment, I did make a change which you all saw so that it shows as an ongoing commitment to racial equity and social justice in the title. And then in the body of that particular item, it does say that we would have a formal agenda item at least twice a year to see how we're doing, and that we would invite, Christy Kumar is here with us, Rebecca Hoyt is here with us, that we would have them come to our meeting, which we've done in the past, and help several meetings actually, where they've helped facilitate discussions about how we're doing and how we can continue to grow in our goal of this consistent commitment to including racial equity and social justice in our work. And Christy and Rebecca are here tonight in case there are any questions with regard to that. So there's a lot in here, and I'll just leave it at that and open it up for questions and things you may want to talk about. Harold.
Yeah, thanks, Anne, for the overview and providing the red line thing. As you said, it's a lot, but it's really helpful. And yeah, it was a good reminder, like, yeah, this is something we came up with a couple of years ago, and a lot of the changes make a lot of sense. I had one or two questions. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through here to find the right spot. So there are added bullet points under the recurring, ongoing, quarterly, and semi-annual items on the top of page 2, which is ongoing ordinance change review and ongoing development and or recommendation of transportation policies and plans, which I think are good items to have. I guess I was just a little bit unclear, like, how does that happen? Like, is that something that you work with staff on and then it is brought to the commission? Or because it doesn't seem to be something that we are able to do during our meetings, really, because it goes, changing ordinances and developing policies is a lot of work, which is important, but it can't happen in meetings.
Yeah, and Eric and Tom can help me here, but I've seen it happen different ways. One where Transportation Commission or Transportation Policy Planning Board has said, "Hey, should we change this ordinance?" And then it goes to Eric or and staff, and they work on changing the ordinance. Like, for example, the ordinances that need to be changed when Complete Green Streets policy was approved. Remember, it couldn't be implemented until the ordinances were changed. So staff worked on that and then brought it through, I believe it was the Transportation Commission at that point, to review and recommend it to the Common Council. And I I think, Tom, the same is true on policies that, some could be, back the Transportation Policy and Planning Board, there were, hey, we should be looking at updating this, or we should be doing that. And then staff works on it and brings it back, or it can come through other channels as well. So you're right, Harold. I don't think it's something that actually gets worked on at the Transportation Commission, but the ideas can be generated by the Transportation Commission and then flipped to staff to work on, or it can come the other direction. So, Tom, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I think we have models for both. I think most of our projects, such as Complete Green Streets, perhaps the upcoming curb management, will be staff generated. But I will say that the Safe Streets Madison went in the other direction, right, where there was a joint subcommittee that actually developed the content, and it went towards staff to implement. So I think the majority will be staff oriented, but we should not preclude the opportunity for something to occur at the committee level or commission level.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers my question. And then the only other thing I saw, we struck out the section on special projects and/or review for the specific work plan year, and didn't replace it with anything. And Tom, you just mentioned the curb management, which I know hasn't started yet. It may or may not start in the first year. And I mean, I guess we can always add things that as they come up, that are covered by the rest. But I noticed that, we took all of this out because we have completed it, right?
Yeah, let me explain why I did that. That was on the Transportation Commission work plan, and a lot of the work was being done at the Transportation Policy and Planning Board. So we needed to be updated at the TC as to what was going on. And as I was looking at it, figuring, well, which ones should we take off? Which ones should we put on? And I found myself looking at Tom's director's report, and I thought, well, wait a minute. We get Tom's director's report, every couple months, every quarter, whatever. And he does that. He brings us up to date on all the projects. And if there's action needed on them, then they come to us. So in my mind, Harold, the updates on what's happening come through Tom's director's report. And so we don't need to, it's a lot of work to try and mention them separately and keep track of them. And he's doing that in his report. So does that make sense?
Makes total sense. Thanks for explaining it.
Okay.
All right, that's all I had.
Okay, thanks. Pepe, you're next.
Thanks, Anne. And I, of course, I echo Harold's words. Thank you for working on this and doing all those updates, especially the red line option was very helpful. I have one question about point number 2, where it talks about having full access to materials.
Yes.
We talk about, presentations, reports, etc. in Legistar at least 48 hours before commission meetings, which I think is great. That really helps. Now, would it be reasonable to request to add there the meeting minutes that need to be approved that also come with certain time in advance? Sometimes when those are sent within the day or only a few hours before the meeting, they're not very long or very, very into the weeds. It's something that is fairly simple to go through, but still, if it's too close to the meeting, it's kind of hard to find time to do that.
Sure. So how about if I just say, in order to allow full access to materials and minutes, should I just say that?
Sure. That would work.
And to enable efficient commission meetings?
Right. My main question is that reasonable to request? I know Aidan works on that specifically right now, and happy for you to chime in, Aidan, if there's a point that we need to take consideration on in terms of having all the information available for making that possible. But that would be my request.
Yeah, Aiden, I would think that it would be reasonable for you to get the minutes out by Monday afternoon would be 48 hours ahead of time. Would that be reasonable, Aiden?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good add to the rules.
Okay, so I will add that the minutes in. I'll read it more carefully afterwards and make sure exactly where I add that in. But I'll add meeting minutes. How's that, Pepe? I'll add it in there in the appropriate place.
Thank you. I appreciate
Is that good? Sure. Okay. Is that all you had then? Okay. Bill, go ahead.
Thank you, Ann. I think I want to start this off. We've had discussions, it's been quite a while ago, maybe a year ago now, and I want to address the issue of ADA transition plan. That I think, even though, as I understand it, the Transportation Commission is not charged in the city as to do the lead for this. I believe it's civil rights, but it is such an important issue that I think it should be in our work plan. Either know what the status is in civil rights of how they're making, if they're making any progress on getting the transition plan out. Even if they are in charge, there still is a great deal or a great amount of the material that will have to come from transportation to go into that transition plan. Transition plans came about as the 1990 ADA Act. It's Title II of the ADA is where the requirements for agencies that have more than 50 people to have a transition plan. And to my knowledge, the city has never developed one. Some people, so far, it's only been some of the largest cities in the country that have got in trouble with not, from the Justice Department, of having the ADA transition plan really up to snuff, if you will. But it really is something that I think would be very beneficial to us as a commission to know whether what our plans are and help us prioritize with what we need to do for ADA. And so I think it just exactly how we put it into the work plan, but it is something that I think is very important and is lacking in our current work plan, because there is no mention of it whatsoever.
No, there is not. So I have Tom and Eric. Tom, you want to go first?
Yeah, I actually, I spoke a little bit with Bill. DCR is taking the lead on that, and they are working on it. But I also feel like the ADA transition plan is highly, there's a high transportation component, and having a certain amount of accountability from the Transportation Commission seems fully appropriate. And while, Bill mentions that only large cities have gotten in trouble, well, Milwaukee got in trouble just 3 or 4 years ago. And so it's, right now I feel like it's an issue that needs to be on the front burner for the city, not the middle burner or the back burner. So I'll just say it would be appropriate to add a measure of accountability within the TC if that's what the body wanted to do. And then Eric may also want to add to this since he's our staff attorney.
Yeah. Initially there was some concern that we didn't have a transition plan, and so I sort of investigated that in looking, asked other attorneys in the city attorney's office, and followed up with various departments. We don't have digital records of resolutions and ordinances before about the year 2000. So we actually had some light duty metro operators that were able to go pour through some of those records and see what the city did in the early 90s. And between that and a case a few years ago where we actually had to show our transition plan, some information was given to me by the deputy city attorney. We've had a transition plan, but I still haven't seen it or found it. It may have been destroyed pursuant to a document retention schedule. But in speaking with one of the more senior assistant city attorneys, we likely did all the things required of a transition plan, and then since then have just complied with ADA requirements in sort of a not very centralized fashion. So I'm working with DCR. DCR has hired a consultant as well, and we are in the process of sort of determining next steps for the city. But, this was a concern, Bill, when you brought it up last fall. It was kind of a major concern of, oh my goodness, are we way out of compliance here? And ultimately we found enough that it isn't something that we need to be worried that the city is way out of compliance. We have looked at, what are the things that are required? And those things are in place. For example, having an ADA coordinator, in our case, that's Rebecca Hoyt, and meeting the other various elements. So it is something that's ongoing. I think it could be in the TC's work plan or not. We're kind of looking at, it's not just all on DCR either. For example, in terms of anticipating compliance with the new PROAG guidelines, there's work that has to be done at traffic engineering and city engineering. So I could ramble about this, but I hopefully that's enough that provides some information that's useful for the commission.
Rebecca also has her hand up. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Thank you. I'm happy to provide an update on the transition plan since I'm here. We have retained a consultant, Access to Independence, which is a disability-led organization, and we're working across agencies. Just to echo what Eric said, we have all the elements of the plan in terms of being compliant at the moment, but our effort this year is really not so much focusing on staying out of trouble or maintaining compliance, but really how do we work across agency to improve transit conditions for our residents with disabilities. And so a part of that is looking at areas where we can improve our compliance. But what we're really focusing on with our consultant is where do we find recommendations about how we can improve functional accessibility, which is a level beyond ADA compliance, and make those recommendations for the city. So we're taking a very thoughtful and intentional approach. So rather than putting something together really quickly, we really want to be intentional about producing a quality plan for the city. So the update, but happy to collaborate with the Transportation Commission as the plan develops.
The one thing that I would say, Bill, we do have a general topic, ongoing development and a recommendation of transportation policies and plans. So generally speaking, that may come underneath that. And then what we would do is put it on our agenda log as something that we would want to have come to the Transportation Commission. So that's one way we could handle it. And another way we could handle it is having ongoing review of the city's ADA transition plan and compliance, or something along those lines, as something that we've recognized as important enough that we want to have it entered into our work plan, and then, work with Rebecca and Tom and Eric or whomever to add a little commentary after that if we would like to do that. So I don't know, Tom, Eric, Rebecca, if you think that ongoing review of the city's ADA transition plan and compliance would be an appropriate way to term it? And Bill, would that address what you're concerned about?
I will tell you, just compliance is not the word that I think is what I'm looking for. I view the transition plan as an inventory, if you will. How many APS signals do we have in the city? Have we put in, and what is our policy on when we put those in? There will be no new things in ProReg that will with RRFBs that will be necessary in the future to do. And I think if somebody were to ask, how many, of any of these particular items, and I'm happy to say, that the city has been doing good jobs with things like curb ramps, for instance, as an example. But I think, it should be in a document that we can point to. It should be a living document is my main concern, is that it's not just something that you do and say, okay, we're in compliance, and then put it back on the shelf for 5 years. I think this is something that we should be using as to helping making priorities on how we address our pedestrian accessibility improvements each year. And so I think I'm really looking more as not as the compliance kind of thing, but more so as a living document that we use, that the city uses in making decisions on budget issues that work. How much money should be spent on different things as needs arise, and how it should have the policies in it, absolutely, but then it should have an inventory of how many of the different things. Because nobody is perfect. You'll never get to the end line on this. This is something that I think a lot of people have to understand. It's not just say, okay, we've got everything done. No, that's not how it works. I mean, standards change and so forth. So I think it's something that the Transportation Commission, if DCR is responsible and that they are the coordinator for it. But I just think so many of these in the transition plan are transportation related that I think we, as a commission, we should, it's kind of on our jurisdiction to really know where we stand in any point in time on all of these different ADA issues.
So I hear what you're saying, that compliance makes it sound like we can stop and we're done. So you're suggesting ongoing review of the city's ADA transition plan? So something that would be done on a continuous basis?
I think so. And I think, but I again, like Eric has pointed out, that there isn't a document currently that DCR has been working on for a year. They really have not got something that they can point to. I think it's something that there's got to be some sort of schedule on when at least an initial product put out. It won't be perfect, and I think we all have to recognize that. But at least as we've done with other issues, that constant improvement is necessary. But at least we need to have something. We don't have anything right now.
Rebecca, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate Bill, you elevating this issue. In the current work plan, I'm observing that transit for people with disabilities is under non-reoccurring things that may appear. And I really think that probably will appear in every conversation you have about transportation. So I think the transition plan is a component of that, but I might offer the suggestion that similar to the section you have about racial equity and social justice, is a transit equity for people with disabilities. So that's centered. And
I'm sorry, you're cutting out a little bit. Could you repeat that, please?
I would offer similar to the section that you have for racial equity and social justice as an ongoing commitment to transit equity for people with disabilities. So that will be central to so much of the work that you do.
So, what I think I hear you saying is that rather than having it under non-recurring items, which may appear, that we move transit for people with disabilities and call it transit equity for people with disabilities, and move it from there to the front of the document, and perhaps work in this ongoing review of the city's ADA transition plan along with this transit equity for people with disabilities. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that's in line with Bill's request.
I think what I'm looking for is to not necessarily cover everything that the city is doing with ADA, but rather the pedestrian right-of-way facilities that the city maintains. And that's the part that I think is really our jurisdiction. And I think that needs to be resolved, or put together if you will, again, an inventory. Where do we stand in 2024 or 2025 with our facilities?
Is it fair to say ongoing review of the city's ADA transition plan with regard to transportation issues? It's very hard to write as a committee, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to summarize and hopefully move this forward. Chrissy, go ahead.
I just wanted to offer, because I know you're doing the hard work of splitting, Chair, and perhaps there's the annual review of the semi-annual, there's like at a certain timeline of the ADA plan, but really uplifting Rebecca's ad for the ongoing transit equity for folks with disabilities. So really making that ongoing, the ADA plan can be, you know, on a semi-annual, annual, one of those buckets. And so there are two separate pieces that are obviously.
Okay. So they really sound like they are separate then. So we should do them separately.
I think so. Like obviously they're linked, but for writing in this document, absolutely ongoing equity for folks with disabilities, ADA plan. I think it would make sense for y'all to check in on a quarterly, semi-annual, or annual.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like we have the suggestion, and I could certainly work with Christy and Rebecca on how to add a little bit more to transit equity for people with disabilities, move that to the ongoing section, and Bill, annual review of the city's ADA transition plan with regard to transportation issues, or quarterly,
Sure.
Semi-annual. How often are you thinking?
And whenever the city makes an update to their transition plan, it should come to the Transportation Commission, not necessarily to approve it, but at least for information so that we're aware of it, that it exists, and ask any questions that we would have.
Okay, well then I go back.
Accept the plan.
Then I go back to ongoing, because that's what the ongoing section is. That's whenever
That's fine.
somebody has one of these things available, then it comes to us.
Right. That's
Okay.
fine. That's fine.
Okay. Eric,
What I was trying to focus on was the facilities element, but I certainly understand and appreciate the ADA for the transit is also important, but that's not what really is in the transition plan.
right. But right now we have that under non-recurring, and I think that the suggestion is to move it forward and highlight it
Okay. That's fine.
as something that we should pay more attention to, which is fine. Eric, did you, and Tom, Tom looks like he's first, Eric, and then you.
Yeah, I'll let Tom go first.
Yeah, I think I'd like to maybe echo what Christy said, that what Rebecca said is maybe an important but separate thing. You know,
Yep.
the ADA transition plan has it's almost have a legal definition of what needs to be in the components, you know.
Yep.
And so I want to acknowledge and elevate what Rebecca says, but it doesn't necessarily fall under the ADA transition, but maybe adjacent to it as a separate item.
Sure. So we would be talking about having two of them. Transit equity for people with disabilities would move from non-recurring in the back to ongoing and highlighted, and we would add one ongoing review of the city's ADA transition plan with regard to transportation issues, or we may need to bring this back with some additional add-ons as people have them. Is that all that you had now, Bill?
Well, since I raised the issue, I guess I asked the question to either Eric and or Tom that do you agree that for the transition plan that transportation should have a great deal of at stake in preparing that portion of that document, even though the final may be going through civil rights?
Yeah, I think there's sort of two, things we have going on, and behind the scenes staff has been, looking at both these things. There's sort of the legal policies and procedures, having the complaint process, the ADA coordinator, some of those elements that are pretty static, just that policy. Right now, DCR staff is working with the consultant on that. But then what you're talking about in terms of sort of our functional inventory of, sidewalks, curb ramps, things like that, it really lives at traffic engineering. And some of those traffic engineering documents have then, been sent to this group that I'm a part of. DCR and our outside consultant are digesting those things. But I think it probably makes sense for this body, sort of like you just said, to have, some say in those overall policies, even if this body isn't necessarily the body that makes the final recommendations to the council on that, would likely be a different commission. But then in terms of working with traffic engineering to prioritize, which pedestrian ways or sidewalks, which are two totally different things, for those that follow the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Anyway, to have this body really work with traffic engineering to ensure that work is being done. So maybe that's how the handbook items should reflect the ADA transition plan needs.
I'm on board with that. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, Bill, I think you still have the floor. So you have your hand up, but I think I didn't, we're still talking about the same thing that you asked about. So it sounds like we've got two takeaways here as a result of the conversation, which I think we can certainly work on together. Is that what you had then, Bill?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Alder Harrington McKinney, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Bill, I appreciate you bringing this item up, and it really lends to my question. Really, I had my hand up. My question really was after Tom's initial comment about staff generated. And so it's been such a conversation. I lost my train of thought, but I want to circle back to what Bill, you said is that this is a working accessibility document. It's not a check off the box. And so the discussions that we have just heard related to disability and what's in and what's out is absolutely what we should be looking at when we do the stroke related to equity. And so and I know that, and I appreciate the work that has been done on this document. There's a lot of work that I saw that you put in, but it still is not baked yet. And I don't know how we can continue to look at other areas that might be redlined as well. But my takeaway is when Bill said that this is a working document, that transportation is so engaged in and so we use the term bike BIPOC equity and all of that. But transportation is so integrated into every aspect of what we do as a city, and to make sure that we're looking at how these things fit together are so critically important. And more, I'm understanding that what we have is a work plan, but it's not a work plan. It is, how are we doing? And so how are we checking in? And so those are the things that make the work plan a living document. And how can we begin to look at that as a work plan that is a living document? We're not making decisions about what's there, but we need to make sure that whatever department, whatever commission is responsible for moving it forward, that there is some feedback, that we understand what's going on. And so I had a list of questions that I'm not going to even go into. I'll draft those and send those in, but I'm so appreciative of Bill stopping the conversation and saying what's critically important. And we use the ADA compliance, but it should guide all the work that we're doing as a commission to make sure that transportation is effective and efficient for all modes of travel, transportation. And so I won't go into my notes because, they're all over the place, but I just want to make sure that I acknowledge Bill for bringing this up, because it was critically important, and that's where I was landing.
Thanks, Alder. Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. I had a thought that's related to that conversation. When I initially was looking at this, I had a suggestion that I think I heard Rebecca Hoyt say, and maybe wasn't captured, which relates to everything we were just talking about. The ongoing commitment to racial equity and social justice, I think, ought to include everything we were just talking about, which is disabilities and any other inequities that we might not realize we ought to be thinking about. And so, Anne, I appreciate you were trying to elaborate on that section, and in doing so mentioned people of color and people with low incomes. But I'm afraid that by trying to be specific, we've created blind spots in that section. So I think
that comes right out of the ordinance, Chris. That section I added comes right out of the ordinance.
Sure, but I don't think it needs to. I think by saying less, we can do more. It ought to include folks with disabilities and accessibility needs. But maybe we don't need to say that. This is an ongoing commitment to equity and social justice.
I think that what Rebecca was suggesting, if you look on the very last page, I don't know, it's 1, 2, 3. We should have numbers instead of bullet points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Maybe the 10th bullet point says transit for people with disabilities is under non-recurring items which may appear. And what Rebecca is suggesting is that we highlight that and bring it forward as an ongoing item, and change it to transit equity for people with disabilities. So in that case, Chris, we'd be pulling people with disability. They're already pulled out, but they're sort of at the back. And what I'm hearing is that they be pulled out and brought forward.
I don't want to speak for Becca, obviously. Lots of issues come up that we don't anticipate. We had a pretty contentious talk about the price of parking when accessibility and equity came up. I don't think we need to call out that specifically as another bullet point. I think we just need to make clear our ongoing commitment to these equity issues. That's all I'm suggesting.
Yeah. So you thinking, were you suggesting that there's too much in that section now?
I believe so. I believe if we try and enumerate every equity concern we can think of right now, we create blind spots and make a document that's too long.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So maybe take out that part that I added, which was the way that it used to be. Christy, did you have more, or do you want to hear what Christy has to say before we come back to you, Chris?
Yeah, I just want to agree. I think Chris is right. There's two options forward. I think the explicit sentence is Transportation Commission will work to eliminate any disparities that people of color experience and people of low income experience, etc. You've created this condition where you're now talking about these two sections of community, and there's also obviously other sections. So if you're going to go down the list route, you got to add to the list. That's an option. It is okay to name things. You can add and should add people with disabilities, people who have a language preference other than English. I do think you cover good ground if you use those 4 sections. You're covering BIPOC, disability, language access, disability, justice. We know that those are really important for transportation equity. So I think that would be good. You go that route where you list those 4 and then you say, and those who are otherwise systematically, right, marginalized. So you add the and. Or you just go, then you don't list them. And you kind of miss something there by not naming these populations that we know are absolutely experiencing discrimination. So I'm not anti the list, but it's your call, but I definitely think that 2 is not enough.
So as I said, I just copied what was, I went through the regulation and added stuff in that wasn't. So I think the 3356 is probably too narrow. So what I can do, I just wrote your name by that, Christy, and what we can do is look at, let me just back up 1 second and say, got a lot of great feedback here. So what I'd like to do is work on these different sections with people and bring it back next time. And so, Christy, I hear what you're saying, Chris, and I totally understand and get that. So that language, we don't have to put in what's in the regs. We can put in what we choose to put in. So I'll work with Christy on that section with what you have in mind. Does that sound good?
That sounds great, and I appreciate Christy's thoughts on that. So wherever you land, can I make a couple other points?
Yeah, you have the floor.
Okay, so actually, you just kind of hit on this. Like, you did a lot of work, sort of copying the regs over to our work plan. I don't think you need to do that. Like if they're in the regs, then they're our responsibilities. And so another question I had, I was wondering about not seeing specific things on here, like curb management, which Tom mentioned earlier. And it sounds like you've gotten rid of the list of specific things that are coming and put it under recurring review of ordinance.
Yeah. That would be under ongoing development or recommendation of transportation policies and plans, because it's like something that's shifting all the time.
I personally don't find that helpful in terms of a work plan. If we're going to work on something in the next year, I feel like it would be more helpful to know what those things are. So Bill mentioned the ADA stuff, and curb management comes to mind. So that's just my 2 cents.
So, we're working on the North-South BRT. We're working on Amtrak. Everything.
Is that in here?
No, it's not, because that's a specific policy or plan that's in the process of being worked on. So I went more general because it's something that, Tom, some of them are longer term, so they don't change over the course of the year, but they may change year to year, or they may change within the course of the year. Implementation of the East-West BRT, we're doing that now. The planning for the North-South BRT. So, we can add back a specific section on things that we're working on. Tom, your thoughts on that?
Yeah. How long does a passenger rail study last?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Right.
That's a small joke. A few people on the commission got that. Uh, yeah, I guess I don't have an opinion. You know, the transportation department has work plans, and we bring them here. But our work plans and kind of become your work plans in some ways, right? And we have busy times when we have big decisions to make, such as they could either be listed in your work plan or not listed in your work plan, I guess.
I mean, Harold mentioned earlier that he missed seeing it. Chris, you're mentioning that you missed seeing it. I mean, our goal and our handbook says we're going to update it every year. So we can, add back a specific project. I don't know what we can call it. Maybe specific project list. I'll look back at what we used to call it. I think we can certainly do that. And Tom, I'd have to work with you to, hit the major ones that we would add back in there. And if I can just follow through on, I want to respond to what you said earlier about not including some of the things in the regs. I tried to hit the important stuff in the regs because this work plan does two things. It helps us make sure we do everything we're supposed to do every year, on a quarterly basis, semi-annual, whatever. And it also is a great tool for us to look at and say, oh, this is what we do for people who are new to the group. It will be posted on our website. So anybody who's a new commission member, anybody who's an alder, anybody who's a resident can look to see this is what the Transportation Commission does on an annual basis. So it's a combination of both things, I think, Chris. Generally, this is what we do. Because we don't list all the street projects, we put them under one category, if you will. So it's kind of a combination, but it was tough. Don't get me wrong. It was tough to do this, to expand this to include the policy stuff. So Chris, your thoughts?
So, okay. Maybe one clarifying question. Was your intention in changing this? It used to say July 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2025. Your intention is this work plan is not specifically bound by a certain year anymore. This is just our general work plan every year.
I thought about if we made it general enough that maybe we wouldn't have to change the specific things, but it sounds like we're leaning back the other direction. And if that's the case, then we would change it back to July 1st of 2024 to June 30th of 2025, because that's what I'm hearing that people are more interested in, is adding back some of the specifics so that we can have that. Would that be your preference?
Yes, it would be, but you've done a lot of work here. I'm not saying we need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
I would, when I came into it, I imagined a work plan would be, these are the things we're doing in the next year. So that we have a way of laying those out and prioritizing them. But I see what you're trying to do here. I don't have a strong opinion.
Yeah, because some of the things, part of the problem is some of the things we don't know what they're going to be. They're just these ongoing things that come to us. And then there are other things that we have said, yeah, this is what we're going to work on. So I hear from people that there's a desire to list some of those things that we know are specific that we're going to work on. Tom, your thoughts?
Yeah, actually, when you think about our recruitment tool, right, maybe listing the projects is more interesting. If we list the projects, maybe just put a caveat saying our anticipated for the year, so that gives a little bit of wiggle room. Like, for instance, the curb management, we do want to move forward on that. We're just having a hard time getting the staff resources with, the BRT opening and north-south. So that might slip to late 24 or 25. So maybe just providing a little bit of flexibility in the listing of the projects, just understanding, that staff resources and other things that come up that we don't even know will come up can affect the schedule or the implementation.
Sure. That makes sense. Robbie, go ahead.
Just a very quick comment about the ADA transition plan. I just wanted to go back to that because when Bill started talking about it, I actually had to look up what that was. And I just wanted to be clear that, number one, when Rebecca was talking about it, she seemed to indicate that it was a transit plan, and it's not. It is and Bill was specifically talking about physical infrastructure, especially for pedestrians. And it has to do with things like curb cuts and accessible signals and things like that. So I just wanted to make that very clear that it is not a transit plan. It is a transportation plan. And Bill was especially worried about the physical infrastructure. And I think it has more to do with sidewalks and curb cuts and accessible signals than it does with our transit system. The other thing that I was just going to comment
Can I just say I have them as two different things. Okay. So we'd move forward with two different things. Yep.
The other thing I was just going to comment on is that our sort of city and committee commitment to equity and inclusion is a little separate than a federal requirement that we do a certain type of plan. And those were just the 2 points I wanted to make. Obviously they overlap, but they are different things. So that was all I was going to say. And I hope, Bill, that I have indicated what you meant to indicate. So thank you.
Okay. So this was a lot of really excellent feedback and discussion, and the only way to generate feedback and discussion on a document like this is to give it a go, bring a draft, and hear what you have to say. So, and those of you who've been on the Transportation Commission in the past, remember we had some robust discussions about, the quarterly traffic safety report used to be way different from, look at the evolution of that over the years. So we've had a lot of excellent, deep, and robust discussions about what we want to have in our work plan and how we want to handle it. And so I got a lot of great feedback from people, and my plan would be to not ask for any approval tonight. We need to, in my opinion, take it away and meet with Tom and Eric, Christy, Rebecca. Bill, I may wrap you in for some discussions, and Chris, I may bounce something off you relative to some things, and then put another draft together to bring back. This was very difficult to do. It was very difficult to do, but this has been very helpful conversation. Robbie.
On that note, I was just going to make a motion to refer it to our next, would our next meeting be appropriate, or do you need more time?
I would say that, how about the July 31st meeting?
Okay, I will make a motion to refer this to the July 31st meeting, simply so that we have an action on the item.
Okay, thanks. Bill?
I'll second that. I'll second that motion.
Okay. Did you wish to speak to your motion any more, Robbie?
No, I just wanted to kind of clean things up by having an action on the item that was on the agenda. That's all.
Okay. Thanks. I appreciate it. And again, I took a lot of notes, and I think everybody it was really, really excellent discussion. And I appreciate how closely everybody read it and the great thoughts that everybody brought forward. And so we'll take that away, and thanks for giving me till the end of the month, because I think we'll need that time to make sure that we have an ability to connect with everybody. Okay, so sadly, Reed is ill, and Chris Petakowski is not able to be here tonight. So on item number 8, I would ask for a motion to refer this to the July 17th TC meeting. Robbie?
Move to refer it to the July 17th meeting.
Harold?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. I'm going to assume, I think I might have missed on this last one. I assumed a unanimous consent vote. And I didn't see that anybody disagreed, but I could tell everybody was in agreement with that. So I'm assuming a unanimous consent vote here. Unless anybody wishes to vote no. Okay, thanks. Yeah, it was a little tough on that last one. I was being chair and I was also doing the presentation, so it sort of got mixed together there. Okay. Next we have election of the chair and the vice chair. So just a reminder that the chair or vice chair could be an alder. The city attorney's office has said alternates cannot be selected as the chair or the vice chair. So the floor is open for nominations for chair. Robbie.
I'd like to nominate Ann Kovich as the chair.
Thanks. Harold?
That's the second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on that. Are there other nominations? I'll ask again, are there any other nominations? Bill?
I'll move that the nominations be closed.
Okay, there's a motion that the nominations be closed. Is there a second for that, Robbie?
Second.
Okay, so the nomination, I assume unanimous consent vote that the nominations be closed. Unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. Okay, then I'll assume a unanimous consent vote that I be elected as chair unless anybody wishes to vote no, anybody wishes to abstain, or anybody wishes for a roll call vote. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion is carried. Well, thank you. I will continue to try and do my best as chair. So the floor is open for nominations for vice chair. Robbie.
I'd like to nominate Chris McCahill as vice chair if he is willing to do so.
Harold?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Chris, are you willing?
I am, and I will say, as I always do, that the only reason I'm willing to do it is because, Ann, you do so much of the work behind the scenes, so thank you.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. Are there any other nominations? Bill?
I make a motion to close the nominations.
Okay, there's a motion to close the nominations. Do we have a second? Robbie?
Yes,
So there's a Okay, there's a motion and a second to close the nominations. I'll assume a unanimous consent vote. Close the nominations unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain or have a roll call vote. Okay, the nominations are closed, so we'll now vote on the vice chair. I will assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no, wishes to abstain, or wishes a roll call vote. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion is carried. Thanks, Chris, for willing to do that. Okay, so next we have updates from other boards, committees, and commissions. And thanks to you all for all of the service on all of the other boards, committees, and commissions. We dragged you over from Board of Public Works for quorum tonight, Harold, so thanks for doing that. Anybody have anything specific to report? Okay, I'm seeing no hands. All right, next announcements from the chair. We have an appeal of a denial of a taxi cab license. that we received this week. So I'm in the process of appointing an appeals subcommittee to hear that appeal. We have 45 days from the date of the appeal to hold the hearing. I have myself and one other person so far. I'm waiting to hear back from someone. And if she's not able to do it, I'll be looking for someone else to do that. But I will report back to you the results of the hearing once we hold it. But that was the only announcement that I had. Does staff have any other announcements? Okay. Seeing none. Future agenda items. We have for the next meeting potentially revisions to the Transportation Demand Management Program, B-cycle update, and we'd be looking at the Badger Rust Path, which we were going to do tonight. And then for the 31st, review the Complete Green Streets Guide, a public hearing on Metro Transit's new service to Monona and Metro's service equity analysis, and update on our work plan, potentially an update on the equity workshop if Christy's able to come. I haven't really talked to her about that. So those are the items we had. Alder Harrington McKinney emailed and asked that we add gender inclusive language training as a potential agenda item for the future. One thing I wanted to ask people, and this could be done a number of ways. I know navigating Legistar is challenging, as Robbie said. Oh, Tom, did you have something? Sorry.
Yeah, just a note that we're introducing a resolution at the next council meeting to apply for a grant where the deadline actually is this Friday. So we will be presenting on that grant kind of after the fact, after it's been acted upon by the council.
Okay.
So kind of in an apology mode and the grant will be used for the curb management
okay.
thing. So we'll be giving an update, but it will be kind of after the fact, after the council's been acted on. So
Yeah. Hey, go for it. Right. Yeah. Okay. But anyway, back to this Legistar thing. I don't know if it would be useful to have a presentation on navigating Legistar at TC, or would you prefer that I touch base with someone in the council office and get a good resource from somebody who would be willing to, on a one-on-one basis, walk through Legistar with people if you have any questions about how to navigate? And then Aiden could certainly send that resource out to people. Would that, Legistar can be confusing and challenging to navigate, which, well, it sounds like was a bit of a challenge on some of these resolutions that we were looking at earlier. So would one-on-one be an easier way for people to, Chris?
I think if there's not already a resource that exists explaining Legistar, it might be worth doing a quick session here so that that resource exists going into the future, and then we can remember to point folks, including commission members or people of the public, point them to that.
Yeah, I had a hard time finding something when we were putting our training tools. There's, it's in our training, under our training section in the handbook on Legistar, and the only place I ever found anything was something they did for council members at one point, but it was kind of old. So how to navigate Legistar, I don't know, I'll check in and see what I can find about that. Because if there isn't something, it sure would be a good thing to have. That is true. Harold?
Yeah, and I think you pointed in the direction that I was going to go. Like, this seems like something that definitely should be part of the handbook, that new members will, it's a great handbook that helps with a lot of things, but yeah, I don't remember Legistar being in there. And if we could add it there, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, it's in there, but on our website, I have links. We put links in for all the training tools, except I I don't think I was successful in finding a link for Legistar, so we had to have somebody come to TC and give us a presentation, but that was years ago. And so I think it would be helpful to have an online resource for it if there isn't one. So I'll see. I haven't looked in a while, but I'll maybe connect with Karen in the council office, and I'm assuming that would be the best place to go to try and find something. I'll talk to staff and we'll figure it out. So it's in the handbook, Harold, but I didn't find an easy way for people to do it by themselves. So I'll check again and do some more research and see what we can find out. Because you're right. I mean, everybody has these questions and everybody needs to know how to navigate Legistar. So maybe there's a tool and I just haven't found a good link to it yet. So other future agenda topics. Bill.
Just for point of information, there's several of us on the commission that our terms expire this week.
Yeah, so what 3301 says is that it automatically extends for 90 days unless you're replaced. I mean, I think they're usually a couple, 3 months behind in the mayor's office, because I think I just saw some people who were appointed that had terms expiring at the end of April. The ordinance says that your term is automatically extended for 90 days. Hopefully you're all willing to do that, because Bill, your term expires, Nikki's term expires, and Harold, your term expires on the 30th. So the reg says that your term is automatically expired unless somebody is appointed to replace you. So if hopefully you're all willing to continue on until we hear something from the mayor's office. I was in contact with the mayor's office, just sort of, saying, hey, these three folks have their terms coming up. What's up? So, and I'm sure Tom's in contact with the mayor's office as well. So great point though. Thanks for bringing that up, Bill. Okay. Right, we need a motion to adjourn. And thanks everybody. Again, great discussion on everything as usual. Robbie?
Move adjournment.
Okay, and Pepe?
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Going to assume a unanimous consent vote. I've never had anybody object to adjourning ever. So thanks everybody. We'll see you next time.